The sex life of housewives and working married women from a collectivistic culture. Sexuality is the most basic and the most important aspect of marital life. Sexual satisfaction is not merely the absence of sexual dissatisfaction but involves orgasmic consistency and the satisfaction of subjective expectations. Sexual satisfaction in married or committed couples has been studied widely, and researchers have claimed that it is the most important aspect involved in the overall marital satisfaction. Studies have also found significant positive connections of sexual satisfaction with self-esteem, well-being, quality of life, and psychosocial health. The common predictors of sexual satisfaction for couples include sexual desire, sexual frequency, quality of sexual activities, joint willingness of both the partners, communication, and expression of affection. A study by Dr. Sukoon carried out in Pakistan summarized sex life into three major predictors, namely sexual attitudes, emotional expressivity, and sexual functioning. Sexual attitudes can be defined as a person's beliefs about sexuality which are reflected through behavior and are developed by culture and previous sexual experiences. Sexual attitudes differ between men and women. People with higher levels of religiosity have more conservative attitudes towards sex. Emotional expressivity is the way one projects emotional message or experience through verbal and nonverbal cues. Emotional expressivity is defined as a predictor of success in important domains of life, especially in personal relationships. Women are regarded as more emotionally expressive than men. Sexual communication, in addition, has been regarded as an integral part of sexual satisfaction. Gottman suggested that emotional expressiveness is a predictor of marital satisfaction, and emotionally expressive couples are more satisfied as compared to unresponsive ones. Sexual functioning refers to one's ability to adequately respond to sexual stimuli and engage in pleasurable sexual activity. Poor sexual functioning results in sexual dysfunctions. An international survey on sexual attitudes and behaviors reported higher prevalence of sexual problems in East and Southeast Asia than other regions of the world. Most of the research on sexuality, however, is carried out in developed countries and in individualistic cultures. The focus of the aforesaid study by Dr. Sukoon was to analyze the sex life of married women belonging to a collectivistic culture. Culture directs our perception of the world and forms our behaviors. The social norms vary highly between the two main types of culture that are individualistic and collectivistic. People belonging to collectivistic cultures have more pressure to follow the existing social norms in almost all domains of their lives. They need more social acceptance and are more concerned with the lives of others. Marriage, in a collectivistic culture, is usually regarded as a sacred religious activity. The decisions of mate selection in collectivistic cultures are usually taken by the parents. The involvement of love and romance, therefore, in the marriages of collectivistic cultures are not considered important. Daughters, from their early childhood, are raised in such a way that they cannot go against the decisions of their marriages made by parents, and parents mostly wish to marry their daughters within their close families. If asked, girls mostly idealize educated boys. On the other hand, boys idealize beautiful girls to be their mates. Wives in collectivistic cultures are financially more dependent on their husbands as compared to the financial dependence of husbands on the wives. The sexual preferences of men and women after marriage usually remain conventional and in alliance with their culture and religion. Women in collectivistic cultures are sexually objectified and are expected to please men by their physical attractiveness. In contrast to men, they face several cultural challenges and have to adhere to the moral standards of the society strictly. They are more prone to mental disorders, and it's culturally more difficult for them to access mental health services. The aforesaid study by Dr. Sukoon, therefore, intended to unveil the sex life of women from a collectivistic culture where self-satisfaction is heavily dependent on social compliance. The sex life in the context of the study represents three variables, namely sexual attitudes, emotional expressions, and sexual functioning. All the three understudied variables are positively interlinked in the literature. The aspect of sexual functioning may also provide a picture of possible sexual abnormalities. Finding the willing participants was extremely difficult due to the sensitive and private nature of the area of research. The study, however, involved 300 married women from Pakistan. Their age ranged between 18 to 50 years. They included both housewives and working women, along with a demographic information schedule to gather information on participants' age, education, profession, family structure and socioeconomic status. 3 psychological scales were administered, namely the True Blood Sexual Attitudes Questionnaire, the Emotional Expressivity Scale, and the Female Sexual Functioning Index. All the 3 scales used in the study were chosen for having high levels of reliability and validity as proposed by their authors. The chosen scales were thought to give a detailed picture on the understudied variables through the sub-factors involved in the scales. As expected from a collectivistic culture, the findings of the study revealed that the understudied married women scored very low on sexual attitudes, emotional expressivity, and sexual functioning. The attitudinal factor was the weakest in the overall sex life of the understudied women when compared with emotional expressivity and sexual functioning. While analyzing sexual attitudes of the women, it was quite clear that their attitudes toward sex were highly conventional and based on the prevalent cultural norms. The attitudes related to masturbation and erotic thoughts revealed that 39.12% respondents were in favor of having positive attitudes for masturbation and erotic thoughts. Further analyses of their agreement for masturbation and erotic thoughts revealed that 44.85% respondents were in favor of masturbation in the absence of their partners, 40.28% were in favor of videotaping sexual activity, 50.11% were in favor of daydreaming about sex, 19.14% were in favor of fantasizing someone else while having sex with the partner, and 41.22% were in favor of using erotic material. The attitudes related to heterosexuality revealed that 35.26% understudied women were in favor of having positive attitudes toward heterosexuality. Further analyses of heterosexuality revealed that 17% of the understudied women were in favor of premarital sex, 63.44% were in favor of considering sex only for reproduction, 43.28% were in favor of self-centeredness in sexual activity, 47.83% were in favor of not having sex with someone other than the spouse, 18.89% were in favor of having hyperactive sexual desires, 52.50% were in favor of considering love as a condition for sex, 19.22% were in favor of oral genital sexual stimulation, and 19.94% were in favor of anal sex. The attitudes related to homosexuality revealed that 18% of the understudied women were in favor of homosexuality. Further analyses of homosexuality revealed that 17.56% were in favor of oral genital sexual stimulation with women and 19.45% were in favor of bisexuality. The attitudes related to sexual variations revealed that 33.64% of the understudied women were in favor of sexual variations. Further analyses of sexual variations revealed that 51.62% were in favor of having dominance in sexual activity, 45.56% were in favor of inflicting pain for partner's pleasure, 43.78% were in favor of wearing cloths of opposite sex for sexual pleasure, 17.44% were in favor of group sex, 16.06% were in favor of extramarital sex, 41.06% were in favor of extramarital phone sex, and 19.94% were in favor of watching others having sex. The attitudes related to commercial sex revealed that 32.02% of the understudied women were in favor of commercial sex. Further analyses of their agreement for commercial sex revealed that 56.94% were in favor of watching pornography, 45.94% were in favor of watching pornography with the partner, 47.42% were in favor of the positive effects of pornography, 39.78% were in favor of the usefulness of sexual material, 17.61% were in favor of getting involved in prostitution in general, 15.28% were in favor of getting involved in prostitution for money, and 15.56% were in favor of sexual exhibition in exchange of money. The level of emotional expressivity in the understudied women was 52.64%, which is quite unsatisfactory. The scale used to measure emotional expressivity did not have any sub-scales and could present just an overall picture for the level of emotional expressivity. The overall sexual functioning of the understudied women was 62.39%. Further analyses into sexual functioning revealed levels for desire, levels for arousal, levels for lubrication, levels for orgasm, levels for satisfaction, and levels for pain. The correlation matrix for the understudied variables revealed statistically significant positive correlation between sexual attitudes, emotional expressivity, and sexual functioning. Moreover, all the sub-factors of these three variables were also found significantly and positively correlated with each other. Age had significant inverse correlation with sexual attitudes and sexual functioning and a non-significant inverse correlating with emotional expressivity. Education did not have significant correlations with any of the three understudied variables. Monthly income of the women had a significant positive correlation with emotional expressivity. The study also analyzed the difference between housewives and working women and found that the housewives had more positive sexual attitudes than the working women. The housewives also had more significantly positive sexual attitudes for sexual variations than the working women. No significant differences were found in the two groups for emotional expressivity and sexual functioning. A simple linear regression was also calculated to predict sexual functioning based on sexual attitudes and emotional expressivity. It was revealed that sexual attitudes are significantly strong predictors for sexual functioning. However, emotional expressivity did not significantly predict sexual functioning. Despite basic biological factors which drive humans towards sexuality, people also involve reasoning and the concepts of reward and punishment in any sexual activity. The cultural and religious viewpoints regarding sexual behavior also play a vital role in taking decisions about sex. The sex life, in the current study, was observed through sexual attitudes, emotional expressivity and sexual functioning. As most studies of similar nature have been carried out in Western individualistic cultures, the aforesaid study by Dr. Sukoon was thought to portray an unidentified picture of the sex life of women belonging to a collectivistic culture. Pakistan is a developing country and is highly collectivistic in nature. The major religion of its habitants is Islam, which clearly describes the rules and regulations pertaining to one's sex life. Islamic rules on women's sexuality, if summarized, prohibit women to be involved in any sort of extramarital relationship and allow them to do whatsoever they want with their spouses except anal sex and sex during menstruation. Studies from Muslim societies have argued that Islam itself has not differentiated and degraded women by sex or gender. It is rather the cultural factors which put men superior over women in several aspects. The feminists in Pakistan did not consider feminism in contradiction to Islam. Pakistan is a signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. In practice, however, men prevent women to be regarded as equal citizens. The existing literature from Pakistan is quite silent about the sex life of women. The aforesaid study by Dr. Sukoon intended to fill this knowledge gap by measuring the sexual attitudes, sexual functioning, and emotional expressivity of Pakistani women. Sexuality is an extremely important part of their lives and would surely contribute to representing the levels of equality and equity they may possess in the male-dominated society. The study intended to project the actual picture of the sex life of these women. The core findings of the study confirmed that the understudied women still adhered to the cultural norms of sexuality. In other words, the understudied women did not enjoy their sex life to a maximum potential. Their attitudes towards sex were not remarkably appreciable and could have been improved if sex was considered as enjoyable as in many individualistic cultures. Several sexual aspects which are not primarily contradictory to the religious rulings were also not perceived positively by the understudied women. Their attitudes toward masturbation, sexual fantasies, having a variety in sex with the legally married spouse, and oral sexual stimulation are some examples in this regard. Their emotional expression in general was also unsatisfactory, which could lead to less sexual assertiveness within the legally married spouses. The levels of sexual functioning were comparatively higher than sexual attitudes and emotional expression. This can depict their involvement in sexual activities without having adequately positive sexual attitudes and emotional expressions. Several earlier studies also noted that marital sex is mostly a routine work and is not necessarily an indicator of sexual desire, sexual pleasure, or sexual satisfaction. Wives usually have sex with their spouses to sustain a secure and protected relationship. They have sex even unwillingly due to cultural, social, and situational pressures. Another interesting finding of the study was the statistically significant difference in the sexual attitudes of housewives and working women. The working women had significantly less positive sexual attitudes as compared to the housewives. This also supports the adverse role of the collectivistic and conventional nature of culture in which women don't feel themselves free in their sexual decisions. The findings reveal that the more women are in touch with the society, the more they develop negativity about sex. The results of the study revealed that the women were not desirous for unconventional sexual attitudes and practices such as masturbation, homosexuality, bisexuality, sexual fantasies regarding strangers, oral genital sexual stimulation, use of erotic material, group sex, etc. They mostly considered sex for reproductive purposes. The findings of the study also suggested that sexual attitudes, emotional expressions, and sexual functioning are all positively and significantly correlated with each other. And sexual attitudes are significant predictors for sexual functioning. This suggests that if the understudied women modify their sexual attitudes in a more positive direction, they could enjoy their sex life more. Thanks for listening. To read the entire paper, kindly visit www.drsakoon.info.